everyone, I hope you stay cool. It's hot out. It's like 100 degrees right now. So
Yeah, I'm trying to remember that I'm nice and warm today so that when it's February, it's 0. I can remember that at one time we did
yeah,
good weather.
it's 100 right now, and when we take off the 10, or if it's 90 out, we just take that 9 away. We're like, oh, yeah, I remember the days.
This is The Cross Section with Nate Lull and David Edelstein.
My Twitter feed was absolutely the most active it's been probably in weeks, even with everything that's going on, just with all of the reactions that everyone had this past week to everything that took place.
Yeah, mine was active too, and I'm always surprised at the responses that we get. Everyone is really passionate about this, and there's so many different opinions and viewpoints. I don't know about you, but sometimes it can be overwhelming because people are so into this and they want to read the news and put their feelings out there. It's been interesting to watch what people are saying, what they think. It kind of depends on what school they're at, what size school, etc., what sports they're into. But it was a very active Twitter week.
What I found interesting was, people are typically following, and I can see that they're sharing and commenting, and people are really in on this. They're really, we all are, and we should be interested in what's happening. And it's almost like, it's not the World Series that's coming up, but it's oh my gosh, we're getting guidance today. Who's going to win? What's going to be the decision? Like, it's really that same kind of anticipation. And what's interesting is that it's not only this past week been the typical people liking or retweeting or whatever on Twitter's platform specifically, but people are asking a ton of questions with everything that just happened, because even though this was supposed to be the week of guidance, this was supposed to be the week of we're starting to understand the bigger picture, it became more of we still don't know what's going on. And, oh, by the way, here's this other plan that we might be considering. And everyone started asking questions about like the 3 different things that were announced and the one thing that wasn't announced that we thought would be. We got all this information we didn't think we'd get, and we still haven't gotten the information that we were looking for.
Yeah, that was very interesting to see how detailed the plan was that could maybe happen in the spring. And one thing that, people were kind of already nervous and scared about the 21st and what could happen in the spring. And I know you and I have talked that, like, there's still so much time before then where all these things can still change. And, kudos to all the people that are trying their best to make these decisions, because I'm kind of the viewpoint and belief that they're doing their best. They want to try to give us sports, but they're also trying to keep everybody safe. At the end of the day, they don't really know any more than we do. And they're trying to take the guidance from the state and do the best they can. But people are so into everything that they put out, but it's also like, okay, just wait. Like, things could change next week or the week after, long before we ever get to September 21st. So I kind of like look at it and it's like, okay, there's some information, but how soon will it change again?
Yeah. So going back to Monday, what kind of happened this week was Monday, July 13th was supposed to be the day that the state education department provides guidance on high school sports coming back. And not even necessarily high school sports, but how the education schools coming back would work. And athletics would probably be part of that discussion. But what happened on Monday, to start off the week, that wound up being this massively crazy week of sports news. On Monday, it basically was the state education department said, hey, here are social distancing guidelines. Stay 6 feet away from each other. Wear a mask. Use hand sanitizer. Okay, we'll tell you more on Wednesday. And so it became more of a waiting game. And I guess we were expecting maybe something more substantial on Monday, or at least I was. And then we got to Wednesday, and I didn't really see much change. But by Thursday and Friday, Thursday night, I believe it was, and then Friday morning, or Wednesday night and Thursday morning, I noticed that the Empire 8 for college, the conference had decided to cancel sports, which was kind of a shock to me after speaking just last week with Utica College head coaches who said they were pretty confident that because their Empire 8 conference was within New York, that they'd be able to figure something out. So to see the conference just cancel like that, that was kind of surprising. Late at night also. It wasn't a typical announcement. It was like at 9 p.m. And then the next day to get the announcement that the New York State Public High School Athletic Association was postponing or delaying the fall sports season to now a start date of September 21st from the August 24th date. So the week kind of progressed from, okay, we didn't really get much more than we've already known, to, okay, we still didn't get anything on Wednesday, to, oh my gosh, everything just got either canceled or delayed. And so it's that interesting kind of, those first questions kind of come up of like, what were we looking for and what led to the postponement to September 21st as we've learned more about this situation?
Yeah, and I think that goes back to what I was saying before, is just that even when we think we know what's going to happen and we feel fairly confident, you just really don't know what's going to happen. I mean, the Empire 8 example that you gave is a perfect example of that. Like, we talked to those coaches, and then the next thing we know, boom, there's an announcement that they're canceling their fall season. So again, with the September 21st thing for high school sports, I wonder if that will change again when we hit that first week of August and they've maybe started to make some more decisions about actually going back to school and how much that will play a factor in all this. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. So you were surprised by the Empire 8 decision, and also I wondered if when you talked to them, does that mean just no games at all? Can they even like put together some non-conference games just to try to play, or is everything is shut down?
It's interesting because, so one, yes, it was surprising because it seemed that the coaches were telling me they were very confident that they were going to be able to do at least a conference season, because their conference is entirely in New York. And Blaise Fagiano, the Utica football head coach, was telling me that he was, thinking that even the Liberty League, some of those teams like Ithaca College, like we talked about last weekend, were nearby, formerly E8 schools, could potentially play each other. The New York's been in a good spot, wouldn't have to travel beyond the state, would work out. And that was at the same time, in contrast to the NESCAC, where Hamilton College had at the end of last week canceled, and the NESCAC had canceled. And they realized, listen, we're all across this Northeast, we're not going to be able to do that. And what does that mean? And then the college decided by itself. So we had these two schools moving in opposite directions from what they were telling me. The NESCAC and Hamilton College had canceled, and they were like, all of a sudden they took the turn and said, nope, it's not going to happen. But the Empire 8 was like, listen, we were actually able to do this. And so I was like, okay, we might have that. And to see that change happen, I still have to check in with the coaches again and say, whoa, what changed in the past 3 days? And I feel like that's been the conversation. What's changed in the past 2 days that changes the conversation? What did we learn? What have we learned? What became impossible now to really figure out? What became overwhelming to figure out? But what gets me, as far as the high school conversation is concerned, is that the September 21st date was given. So they're still holding out hope. But in that same, we're used to getting an announcement that says September 21st, it's delayed. Okay, let's have a whole conversation about that. Let's just deal with that one thing. But this time, unique from every other announcement I've heard about sports being canceled or happening, is that the New York State Public High School Athletic Association announces that, hey, we're delaying to September 21st, but by the way, just in case schools don't open up before January, here's our plan. One of our 6 options. Here's the one we're most likely to use with the 3 sports seasons. We do winter sports, then we do fall sports, then we do spring sports. They're 10 weeks long. They overlap for about 2 weeks each. And volleyball is moved to spring sports, and the dates are tentative, but this is the one we're going to go with. Just, September 21st is there, but just in case we don't open up before January 1st. So it makes me wonder if we could have a confidence meter, like you say, Nate, what you asked, what is the confidence here about September 21st? What has the confidence been about anything if we're already saying September 21st is now, we're delaying a month. But by the way, here's our plan for January. And it's good to have a plan, but I've never seen it announced along with another delay or cancellation, that they like giving you the heads up on this other delayed plan at the same time. So I don't know. What do you think as far as like, does announcing that other plan, is that just a way to say, hey, by the way, here's another thought we've been having, and we figured we'd just mention it in the same press release? Or is it saying, in essence, we're not very confident about September 21st either, so we want to start giving you the little Cheerios on the ground to follow before you get to the whole box of, this is actually what we're going to probably wind up doing?
I kind of had two thoughts on that. One was that they maybe put both of them in there because they wanted to show that, like, hey, this is what we've been working on. And we do actually have something here that is a little more concrete, and maybe just to say, like, okay, we're trying to show that we're not just kicking the can down the road, and we do have this plan. But I thought it was very interesting that they released it at the same time. And then what I was getting from a lot of my Twitter followers were, well, that spring plan sure seems like it's their plan A. You know, like, it almost and this is kind of what I thought the public perception of it was, is that, boy, they give us a lot more details on that. It certainly seems like they would rather just go with that and be safe and see what happens with school. But I almost just thought, hey, they want to show the public that we're trying really hard. We're thinking out all these scenarios. So here's one, here's two. And instead of breaking it up, maybe they were just excited to try to say, hey, we do have a plan. We're trying really hard here. And they didn't want to hold on to it. And then again, it's hard not to agree with some of the people online that are saying, like, well, that kind of seems like that's plan A. Like, they would rather do that. So I don't know. I'm thankful for those people and that they're trying so hard. I do think we're doing the best that we can as a state to keep people safe and give us sports. I can totally see why everyone's frustrated right now, but yeah, it was interesting the way they released it. So I go back and forth on it all the time on how I feel, for sure.
I'm definitely in agreement with that about, the biggest thing that we're trying to communicate, and that we know that the different associations are trying to communicate, is that they are working on it and they're evaluating it. And that, like you said at the top of this episode, that no one really knows. We've never gone through this, and we're just trying to figure it out and see what happens. And, we started a few weeks ago talking about spitballing all these ideas, and maybe I sound like a broken record, but I mean, we're only covering one story here with all the different little parts here, coronavirus and all the little other aspects. So it kind of is a little repetitive, but the mentality that I think works really well in a situation like this is being able to sit down and say, what if this happens? What if things go really well? What are the scenarios? What if things don't go really well? And what if things get really weird? And we've been in the weird category the whole time. There's no like really good or bad. It's just kind of like, what on earth is happening? And
Right.
How do we keep processing this information? So we've seen guests on our show spitball ideas. We've seen us consider ideas. We've seen Twitter followers suggest ideas. And that's what we've said is needed and the New York State Public High School Athletic Association COVID-19 Task Force and sectional task forces to be able to spitball these ideas. What are all the possibilities that we can possibly think of? And as we get more information, start to narrow those down. And, right now, when we got the guidance from the state education department, which was kind of at first social distance, but wait a few days. And, honestly, what really was the guidance this week, I'm not fully sure, but it did seem to have some kind of impact on, everyone was saying by the end of this month, whether it was college, whether it was high school, I kept asking everyone, when does a decision need to be made to prepare? And
Right.
People have different conceptions of how long it will take for a school to prepare. They were saying the optimal amount of time would be 6 weeks, month and a half, but they think that they could put something together in 2 weeks if needed. But here we are on July 19th, and as we approached mid-month, end of month, it's kind of getting to the time of they had to do something. And because there's just not enough concrete information yet on how schools are going to reopen and how that's going to work, it's probably that would delay the athletics. So we are still somewhat on the track that Governor Cuomo announced of by July 31st, schools have to give their proposals for reopening plans. And then within that first week in August, there will be an announcement. So it seems more that the action was taken off of the, hey, if we get a decision by August 7th, we're not going to be ready by August 24th. So we'll give that extra month of leeway to see what the state does. Is that still in the air? Yeah, because everything's still in the air. We never know what's going to happen any of these days, but that's the plan. And when you're planning on the information you now have, it seems like delaying a month is the current scenario. And then having the one that they've now figured out of the 6 that might be more likely, and saying, hey, by the way, this is also out there because we still don't know what's going to happen, but we're just giving you the options. More information is better than less, but interesting in this situation when everyone's trying to ask for answers and there are only plans, not solid answers, everyone's going to be guessing, what does this mean that they announced this? Does
Right.
But it probably really just comes down to, hey, like, here's where we are and we're still waiting. Believe it or not, it's July 19th and since March 16th, we're still waiting to figure out.
And I think that's the biggest thing is, like, what a thankless job Dr. Zayas and his team have right now, because they're, like you said, at the mercy of, we don't know what's going to happen if we're going to go back and have normal school or not. Will it be a hybrid of some days in the classroom, some days at home, completely trying to go back, completely being at home, and they can't really make a decision on sports until they figure out what's going on with school. So they're waiting too. They're trying to figure out what New York State will do. And from that survey that we talked about before, a lot of people had expressed their ideas that they thought we needed to be in school to have sports. And so since we don't know about school, we still can't know about sports. So I feel like there is a light at the end of the tunnel with August coming, but we still have to continue to wait, just like you said.
And what's interesting too is that, one of the spitball ideas that was thrown out originally was, hey, what if we flip spring and fall sports? And that was in conversation for a while. And the biggest concern that I've heard from section leaders across New York, even beyond 3 and 4 that I've spoken with, from state leaders, from coaches, was that they wouldn't want to risk having the spring sports, if they're moved to the fall, get canceled or something. Because even though people might have thought that, hey, by July we could have this under control, it's the summer, it will go away. Clearly that hasn't happened. We don't even know what a winter brings, if the colder months come around. If we thought summer was supposed to be better, what happens in the winter now with the virus? So we don't know what's going to happen because we've never dealt with this. So everything's almost reactionary. And I know John Rathbun, Section 3 Executive Director, and Rob Zayas too, New York State Executive Director, they both told me that they're planners. They like to plan for a year or two in advance. And right now, planning is in advance. This is everything is reactionary right now. Just waiting. It's not even like sometimes it's about the decisions that are going to be made. It's almost sometimes like we're just literally waiting to see what a virus does. Does a virus get better? And that is obviously impacted by rules that are in place and things that we as humans, actions we take to prevent spreading and stuff like that. But in some ways, it's really like just waiting to see how the virus reacts to the environment of weather and things. And people thought it would die off in the summer, maybe, was one thought. I'm no scientist, but that was just something that was out there, because it might struggle more in heat and humidity. But here we are, and cases are still just as high as they were. So that's kind of had an impact on the sports. But when I look at this proposition, so now we've gone from like the 6 to the kind of one main plan, maybe, that's in discussion, still not finalized. The setup is that starting in January, if schools were not to open up before then, which is important because, again, to finish that thought, that now that we've delayed fall sports, spring sports, if they were flipped to the fall, would be delayed. So that's why people have gone back on okay, we don't need to flip those seasons like that. But we have a different kind of flipping of seasons, which is starting in January, if that's when school starts, you'd have winter sports for 10 weeks. And then within like the last 2 weeks of that season, you'd have fall sports, the typical fall, football, soccer start and do that. And then within the overlap of end of those 10 weeks, you'd have spring sports start. And there's a ton to unpack there that everyone's been asking about. Questions like, what happens if you have multiple sport athletes? What about practice times? What about small schools that can't field the whole team? What about gym usage? Is that why some things happen like that? What about locker room usage? I mean, what are some of the biggest things that you've been hearing or thinking about just with this fall, with this winter, fall, spring plan condensed starting January?
Again, you said a lot of it. Many people, at least in my neck of the woods, a lot of C and D schools were concerned about multi-sport athletes. And Dr. Zay has already kind of addressed that a little bit, saying, hey, this is flexible. We can change things. We can make it work on the fly. We still have time to plan. So that was good. But yeah, that was probably the biggest concern. And a lot of the coaches and ADs that I've talked to think gym time, fields that time of year. If you're at a small school, sometimes the fields overlap. Can the fields sustain all those sports at once if you don't have turf? So that was a big thing. And then a lot of things that I've heard from athletic directors are they still don't have any guidance on, okay, so say my team comes back and we're playing and one of the players gets the virus. Does that mean the whole team is done? Does that mean just that athlete has to quarantine? Does the whole team have to quarantine? Does the coach, who maybe is a teacher, have to quarantine? They don't have any guidance on that either. So yeah, they're all excited about coming back, but if that starts to happen, what then happens with the trickle effect? Is that team out of the league? Does that mess the schedule all up? I mean, just boom, boom, boom. The dominoes start to fall. So they were hoping to get more guidance on that as well. So there's just, like you said, so much to unpack with this. So, what have you been hearing for concerns?
It was interesting because I started getting tweets from different schools, and I know that they've like followed things and they retweet when I did the feature on a student or something, but actual schools accounts, have been tweeting at me asking questions like, for example, the primary one that I heard from this past week was Holland Patton, just north here of Utica. And Holland Patton said, hey, why is volleyball being put as a spring sport now instead of a winter sport? We don't really understand the change. And my first reaction, and I replied saying, hey, I'm going to ask, I'm going to find that out. From conversations I have heard and have had already with these leaders who are making decisions, it might be because of sharing gyms. And I know that sharing gyms and sharing locker rooms and, how many people do you have in the same space at a time might be part of it.
Right. So
when spring sports are going on, the outside ones, maybe they'll have volleyball because you already in the winter have basketball for both, JV, varsity, girls, boys basketball in the gyms. So maybe they just wanted to move the volleyball gym ones over. And Holland Patton, as a specific case study, replied saying, interesting point, but we actually use different gyms for each one. So I said, okay, definitely still want to ask. Every school is different. I don't know the layout of every single school's facilities off the top of my head or where they have specific sports. I got a gist of them because I've been to the winter sports and seen where they are, but interesting that they use different gyms on purpose. I know my high school, when I went to high school, had 3 different gyms. They used the main one for everything, even though they had other ones. So Holland Patton said they use different ones. So I said, what about locker rooms? And they were like, we have that figured out, or it would be, different locations or something like that. So it's interesting to see why that change was made. I don't exactly know the answer to that just yet, but that's what I've been, those are the kind of like first reaction examples that have been happening. Is like every little detail. People are looking at all the details because we want to know the answers, but really the idea is it's a big overall plan for now. Obviously, one of the other biggest concerns or questions people had rather was what happens if we have multiple sports? Can you play at the same time? What if those, what if I'm a fall and a spring? Like, what if they overlap? Can I do both? And then Rob Zayas came out saying, this is just a plan. Right now they're 10 weeks long. We could shorten them all to 8 or 9 weeks and not have an overlap. But it still leaves the questions of, usually there's a certain amount of practices for sports you have to have. Will that be the case? And, you mentioned testing, Nate. That's been a question that's been deferred of who pays for testing? How do you do testing? How do you figure out transportation? But really, it's good to ask these questions and good to think about them. The reason I don't think there are those answers just yet is because we haven't even gotten to the point of figuring out the schools. So it's almost like a decision tree, right? First decision is what happens with schools. If schools don't reopen at all this year, and I mean, that's also one of those fits in the category of wild thoughts, but potential, it's still an option. We haven't said we are coming back for sure yet. So if school doesn't come back at all in person this coming year, that takes everything off the board potentially. So there's still got to figure out schools. Then you've got to figure out how that impacts athletics. Whatever format school takes, can they do athletics? What sports can be done? How can they be done? Then it becomes about all those other things, testing, transportation. But we haven't even figured out the, third generation question yet of what's happening in the grand scheme of things first. So it's almost amazing to think, right? We talk about this crazy time of a pandemic, but to just realize and just take a step back from all the questions and just appreciate almost how it's already mid-July, toward the end of July, and we're still not even on the first decision having been made because we're still in just planning. Nothing's been decided. Not because people haven't made the decision, but because things keep changing so much. We're updating our thought process as we get new information or don't get information. The plans keep changing. It just shows how hard of a job this is to really figure out. And here we are sitting about it, talking, analyzing, bringing up everyone's thoughts. But it really is a very hard thing to be going through, of trying to plan this out, knowing you want to get everyone back on the field. But not only do you not have answers, not only do people who are trying to give guidance not have any answers, but just as a human society, we just don't have the answers to figure it out from step one yet at this point.
Yeah, and one thing that I've tried when I've had private conversations with people is just a lot of upset, frustrated people, and rightfully so, but I've just tried to tell them to remain positive. I mean, there's nothing we can do about this, so don't get so worked up on these details that get released. I get a lot of athletes, especially, who are like, wow, I'm a multi-sport athlete, and that spring plan, I'm not going to be able to play both. And I almost just try to tell athletes, like, hey, that's a long ways away. A lot's going to change before then. Just keep doing what you're doing. Keep working out. Keep focusing on the things that you can control. And that's all you can really do, right? That's all any of us can do, because, like you said, they're trying their best, and we'll cross each bridge as we get there. So
my hope is that, eventually there's a vaccine and people get it and it works, and we will overcome this. It will take time, and there's a lot of struggle in the meantime, for sure. My hope is that in a few years from now, we can look back at, like, hopefully it's like a year and a half, a year, right? End of last year and this year is going to be impacted, but by 2022, 2021, 2022, things are back on track in some way. And let's not be kidding ourselves. We're going to be, everyone who's alive right now will probably be changed forever, like using hand sanitizer more often than ever, sanitizing things. These are things that will probably change in the world of how we, someone posted on Instagram, a speaker, an inspirational speaker that I follow, posted a picture of him speaking at this venue, and it's a picture from behind him on the stage, and you see the crowd, and he's like, can't wait till we can get back to this. But to anyone else, does it just seem like uncomfortable to look at that many people so close together? And people will still be close and things will happen, but you wonder how that's going to change. But my hope is that we look back on this as like, okay, that was a crazy year and a half or whatever it's going to be, but we're on now, and we're back to normal. And in the grand scheme of things, it's a very impactful year and a half or whatever it is, but it's just a year and a half. And right now it's been March, April, May, June, July. It's been 5 months. That's a long time. It really is to go through this, and it's not over yet. And we're much better now than we were then as far as where sports are, right? Like, we have pickup games happening. So we're on the way back. And so the way I look at it is, and maybe I know I'm an optimist, so maybe I'm also trying to be a realist here, but seriously, there's no set day of when things will be back to normal. But every day that we go through this is one day closer to when that day is.
Yeah, very, very true. I mean, I think it doesn't seem like it at times, but we have come a long way in those 5 months, and these people are trying the best they can to get us to where we need to go, and eventually we will get that guidance and things will get back on track. So I'm just trying to, like you said, stay the course, stay positive, and we'll get through it. And we may not be the same normal we had before, but we will get back to doing what we all love, and wait for that day. It'll be fun no matter what form it takes.
I guess the biggest, one of the other big things is that it's easy, I guess, for me or for someone on the outside to say it will also just be that year and a half. But if things really are affected dramatically this year, it's half of someone's high school career that's being changed. I actually can't imagine that. And when I try and think of how I might be different today, if that was the case, I think of all the things that I was involved in person in sports, and people, like, without, it doesn't even need to be said, but people's lives are being changed here. And that is a really, actually, that's bigger than just a year and a half out of a life. That's like 2 years out of your 4 years of high school at a very developmental kind of personal growth stage in life, and college too. So it makes sense why there's so many questions. And every day I'm just trying to get as many answers as I can, and then get the explanations of why there aren't answers in some cases, and then in those cases find out what will it take to make those decisions. And it does seem, as frustrating as it is, that it's just wait for guidance and see where this virus goes, and because everything is connected with how this is going. And today we're in one situation, tomorrow maybe it will be a little different. We're trying to open up in phases. Now things are going in the other direction a little bit. How's the country looking? How's travel? It's amazing how connected it is, and it's getting us all to think. But as frustrating it is, it really does come down to that waiting game.
Yeah, it does. The waiting game is huge, and just trying to stay patient. The people I feel the worst for are the students and the athletes, because I think for, at least for me, yes, this is a tough time, but I'm kind of set in what I'm doing in my career. So you pivot and you do some different things, but you make it work. But if those things that only come along once in a lifetime, like playing high school sports, playing a college sport, being with your teammates, traveling on the bus, all those fun things that you get to do, when those get taken away, you don't get to get those back on the other side necessarily. So those are the people I feel the worst for, and I hope that somehow they find a way to take some positives out of this, so that obviously they're going to be different than they were if they just gotten the chance to play. But I hope somehow they are stronger because of this experience, and it will help them down the road in some other way, shape, or form. And they can say, well, if I made it through that back then, I can make it through this tough thing for my job or this tough situation in my life. And that's what I'm hoping for. But I know it's not going to be that easy for everybody, unfortunately.
No, it's not easy at all. It's forced maturity in a way, right? Like it really is. It's forcing everyone to get through adversity. And I, as you may know, I really enjoy quotes. And one quote I heard this morning or yesterday was something along the lines of, being able to get through adversity doesn't mean that you have no more adversity anymore. It just means that, like, the reward of getting through adversity is not that you have no adversity anymore. It's that you're a person who can get through adversity.
Yeah.
and everyone's going through a lot in their own way right now. And so, yeah, there will still be challenges. Maybe they're not as dramatic as a pandemic, hopefully. But we hopefully, it's forcing us all to really think in different ways, and for many different topics too. And just personally for everyone, I think, at least for me, to like, how do you overcome something like this? How do you get through it? How do you think about it? How do you navigate it? How do you keep in touch with people and get the information? And hopefully, it's not that there won't be any more adversity in the future too. Sports is about adversity, underdog story, championship story. That's why winning championships is so great. You have to go through the whole season. You have to win the league. You have to win all 3 or 4 tiers of a state championship to win. That's adversity all the way. And as sports people too, sports teaches lessons. And I hope that the athletes and I know the coaches are framing it this way, and I hope that it's difficult to swallow, but I hope that we're all able to find out those lessons that will stick with us for the better, even out of this craziness that we're still dealing with. We were dealing with for 5 months, and who knows what's coming up.
Yeah, that was another part of the decision that I guess we didn't mention earlier, is that there won't be any regional or state championships this fall. So obviously that doesn't affect everyone per se, because only a couple of teams will get there in each sport. But if you were one of those teams that you were returning everybody, you thought you had a chance, you were close last year, you want to try to get back there, or you're a defending champion or whatever, that's another tough pill to swallow, is that, even if you get to play, you don't necessarily get to have that chance to win states. So that was a little bit of a bummer too, but totally understandable why they made that decision.
And at the moment, it still leaves open sectionals. And I know that one of the big things that I had talked with Ben Nelson, Section 4 Executive Director, and John Rathbun, Section 3 Executive Director, about same thing the colleges were saying about trying to play regionally, was having leagues work together in ways they haven't before. So playing, maybe not even in your league, but just geographically close games and what that scheduling looks like. But it does leave open the potential for some kind of sectional championship, which was the executive directors and coaches have told me, before there was states, they only had sectionals. You won, and that was kind of the end of it. So, but it is that unfinished story. When they say like, hey, we've got unfinished business, it's kind of that unfinished story. And I think of ones like Proctor football here in Utica, having the best season in their history this past fall, and knowing that they were going to return a bunch of students and be pretty good again this year, and seeing, could they win sectionals this time and make it to the state championship, rather than, because they won't have the second, the at-large seed like they did last year. But they knew that they could compete at that level. What happens? You get teams who, like, was it Westmoreland to Oriskany boys soccer in the sectional finals, that they had won the semifinals on penalty kicks, and then they lost the finals on penalty kicks. That is literally a game of inches. What would it take to have done that next year? And now we don't know what those. It's almost the loss of those storylines, or for them the loss of what could have been, that we're realizing. But people are doing a good job, I think, of figuring out what can be now. And not to totally turn the conversation here, but on the professional side this week, we're seeing Major League Baseball potentially come back. Until it comes back, I'm not saying it's back, but
yeah,
on the 23rd and then the 24th, all teams will be playing. Major League Baseball has seemingly figured out a way to come back, and that would be the first professional sport to come back. Much easier for them because they have funding from TV deals, and they're giant major league organizations, and they can do testing and they can figure this out. So they have it a little bit easier to make decisions to come back. But that's going to be a huge milestone in seeing, because I know a lot of these high school coaches and leaders and athletic directors have told me they're almost trying to model what they do off of what is successful on the major league level. So it's going to be a case study for these high schools to watch if baseball can really come back this week.
Yeah, that'll be very interesting, and to see if it works or not, because it seems like the headlines every day are that this athlete was positive or that athlete was positive. So how do the major leagues get through that? I was watching a little MLS this week, and MLS soccer, and just kind of watching how they were handling things. And that was something that was going through my mind. Could this be done at the high school level somehow? Is this a model that they could follow? So, yeah, I think a lot of it, as we've talked about in other episodes, obviously, will trickle down. How does it affect the pros? Can the colleges pull it off? And then at the high school level, can we pull it off? So, again, a lot of questions left to be answered, but good to see. It was fun, even though there were no fans. It was fun to watch a soccer game, and I was kind of getting really into it, because it was like I haven't watched a live game on TV in months now. So it was fun, even though it was just a regular game, So I had a good time.
And people are saying, how much consequence does the pickup games, the different baseball and softball leagues have that we've spoken about that started July 6th? Maybe not much, but except the significance is, hey, there are actually live sports happening. We're playing. There is something, like, it's showing it's possible. So in our area with high school students, it is possible to have the sports back in some way. So there are a lot of other ties besides just possibility that are involved with like the schools and logistics of that and bylaws and things. But to see that happen, and then to also know that the Major League sports are coming back this week for Major League Baseball and seeing how that goes. As a Mets fan, by the way, there are no fans there, but you can purchase your cutout to put in the stands. You just got to put on your Mets gear, and we could get you to Citi Field differently than I know we were talking about how you've never been there in person. But if you want your cardboard cutout to be in Citi Field stands, that's actually an option that you can pay for that. So I thought that was kind of cool.
What did I see on Twitter? It was like $96 or something.
86. I don't think they've officially said it, but I think it's because it's the 1986 World Series.
Oh, okay.
Or it just really worked out that perfectly. But I got to say, 86 is a very odd number to choose for this.
Yeah. Hey, no, I mean, I'm sure that some people will do it. And it's just another way they can try to keep their revenue stream going, I'm sure. But yeah, a very peculiar number if you're a Mets fan there.
So the Mets and Yankees, they were allowed 3 different exhibition games against other teams. They've been playing against themselves, which is something that's very interesting to see to begin with, because you don't see teams play against themselves. But they've been playing games against themselves. And then they're allowed 3 exhibition games against other teams in their area. And so the Mets and Yankees played on Saturday night. The Yankees won 9-3. And so the Mets will play also Sunday night. I don't have that information yet because it's Sunday afternoon as we're recording this. But that will have playoffs, and to see how they pull that off. And the NHL coming back, they're still scheduled to start August 1st, will be, I think there are things to take away from that. At least the coaches have said they are taking things away from how Major League Sports do it. Come back to influence and advise how high school sports can come back also.